Today, March 16th, 2017, we are meeting with Rene Sands at the DeLand House. I'm Margaret Jones, a volunteer at the West Volusia Historical Society and at the Athens Theater, both in DeLand. And I'm also a friend of Rene's. The name Rene Sands is synonymous with everything theater. In Volusia County, in DeLand, and in the greater Orlando area. This encompasses community theater, children and youth theater, and early childhood education. This has been over a span of 6 decades, starting in the 1960s. Rene, you have worn many, many hats through the years. And I'm sure I've left out something, and please correct me or add to at any time during this interview. Actor, production director, artistic director, producer, playwright, artist in education, teacher, newspaper reporter. I think disc jockey's in there too. Theater reviewer, editor, fundraiser, photographer, and overall cheerleader for theater. Now, this is not to mention wife, mother, and grandmother. Tell us some more about your early life and how you got the idea that you wanted to be in theater.
That's always puzzled me, but it came to me the other day, but I'll get to that. I was born in Pittsburgh. We moved to Florida in 1946. I went to Orlando Senior High School there, and then got married in the 50s, and then all the rest of this began. Although it really began, I suppose, when I was about 4 years old, when I was in a dance recital, which was quite an interesting experience. I think you're familiar with since I've told you so much about it. I was cast as Happy, one of the elves, and well, no, not elf. It was a dwarf, wasn't
Dwarf.
it? Yeah.
7 dwarfs?
Okay, dwarf. Well, that didn't matter. But I didn't want to be Happy. That was an obscure role. I wanted to be Dopey because Dopey was the last one that came off stage in the production. And my mother said to the dance teacher, "You might think about changing her role. She's really headstrong." "Oh, no, she'll be fine. Everything's going to be all right." But it wasn't. I did just exactly what I said I was going to do. When the number ended, I ran to the back of the line, waved to the audience, and went off stage, and that was the beginning. I wasn't very popular with the dance teacher after that. But that's really sort of how it began. And I've been asking myself, what made me do this? Why did I want to do theater so much? And I really, it didn't even dawn on me until a few days ago. We've talked so much about this, that my family is from Germany mostly, and my great-grandfather lived in Saxe-Meiningen, and the Duke of Saxe-Meiningen was really almost the creator of modern theater, of realism, and he had a theater troupe there. So that's where all of this kind of community theater stuff started, really. And my great-grandfather, worked on the railroad, and he was also an actor. He was in plays, no, probably not for the Duke, but in the area because it was so popular. And at night, when he had to go to a performance, my grandmother, great-grandmother, would dress up in men's clothing and go down to the train station and switch the tracks for him. So that little gem probably came from my grandfather and his experiences, and maybe a little bit, I keep forgetting that they're my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. Probably came from that, honestly, because I can think of nothing else that would have influenced me without knowing anything about it. So that was it.
That's great. Well, you happened to give me a program from Love Letters.
Yes, that's right.
And I believe you did
I shouldn't have let you have it.
I believe you did Love Letters twice.
Twice, right.
In the 90s. Is that correct?
Well, in the 90s and then again in 2000 or
2000.
something. Yeah.
With Fred Messersmith.
Right.
And there were only two of you
Right.
in the play.
Yes.
And your daughter
Yes.
directed the play.
Yes, she did.
And of course, when you do a play, there's a bio about you.
Hey, that's right.
And your daughter wrote this.
She did.
About you.
Yeah.
Rene Sands, Melissa, is the role you play.
Mm-hmm.
She began her theater career at age 4 when she was cast as Happy
Well, you don't have to tell the whole story
in
again.
the school production of the Seven Dwarfs, and she was unhappy with her secondary role. And she unilaterally recast herself as Dopey, as you said, so she would be the last in line to leave the stage, and she could wave to the crowd on her exit. She's been chewing the scenery ever since. Look for her first singing interlude in this show, since she was kicked out of chorus in the 3rd grade for her uncanny and incomprehensible inability to carry a tune to save her life. What can we say? It's a gift.
That's it.
That's what she wrote. So the beginning was in 1933, I believe, in Pittsburgh for you.
That's when I was born, yeah.
And I think it's November 21st. If I'm we even looked to see if it was Thanksgiving, but it wasn't.
No,
I
it's
remember
never
looking.
on Thanksgiving. You can get
Right.
as close as the day before, but
Right.
that's it.
Right. And so you were talking about your early experiences. How about the garage shows that you had at your home?
Yes, I don't know where that inspiration came from either, but we did. We had a nice garage, and we had a nice neighborhood, and we played in the streets, played dodgeball, played baseball, did everything. We decided then that we will have shows in my garage, which I produced. I never was in them, but I produced them, and worked quite well. And I decided then that I'd write a play, and I was about 10 years old, I think. So I wrote the play, and I cast the neighbor kids. And we started rehearsals, and we sold tickets for 5 cents a piece to the neighbors, and we sold quite a few tickets actually. And then I'm afraid that I handled it badly because the cast got mad at me and they all quit. So I told my mom, and my mom said, "Well, I had to take all that money back to the neighbors," and I did. I tried, but they wouldn't take it back. So we had a little bit of money, enough to go to the corner drugstore for ice cream. So I was back in favor with the neighbor kids. Then it was
That's great.
didn't work out. So I
great.
think you learn from your failures, so that's not so bad.
We have a really good picture of your mother.
Yeah.
I took in a frame with, she's in the middle, and I don't know what year it was taken, and it has all her pins on it. We got a great picture of it.
Yeah,
Hopefully we're gonna
my daughter
get
put that
in there.
together.
That's wonderful. So your dad was in insurance, I believe you
Yeah,
said, and your mom was a
originally.
secretary,
Yeah.
and you ended up moving to Orlando in 1946, is that correct?
Right after the war.
Okay. What happened then? Can you tell us about high school and so on? And
Well, I
All
went
your
to junior
activities.
high school there. What was left of it, I was in the middle of the 7th grade. And then we moved to Clearwater for about 6 months because my dad thought he had a better job there, but didn't turn out well. And we came back 6 months later. And then I went into Orlando High School in the middle of the 10th grade.
okay.
So
That's where you met your husband,
that's
Larry.
where I met Larry.
And you had to audition to get in the Latin class.
Well,
As
yeah,
I
I had
recall.
to. Yes, sort of.
Tell us about that.
I was going to my classes, and I walked into the Latin class, and the teacher looks at me and said, well, I guess I introduced myself first, and said, I'm not taking any more students. You can't come in here. You can't be in this class. Well, here's a 15-year-old kid, I'm standing there up in front of the class, and I'm pretty embarrassed, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And finally she said, well, all right, I'll let the students vote to see if you can stay in the class. So thank God they all did vote for me so I could stay in the class. And Larry was in that class. And he never let me forget that. And I don't think I ever could forget it, except that Latin became my favorite subject. And I really liked the Latin teacher. And we got along much better after that. I took 4 years of Latin in high school, and not many people do that. So,
Well, your name, we didn't go through your given name
my
and
name.
how he gave you a nickname, which you liked.
My name is Lurene Sands. And Lurene was a hard name to carry around through school because it spelled differently. It's Lou space capital Rene. And I had so much trouble with it. And finally, the next year, I guess, well, in drama class, my drama teacher kept getting people mixed up. And there was a Jeannie Lou and there was a Lurene. And she called me Lou Renee or something like that. Renee Lou, that's what she called me, Renee Lou. And Larry picked up on that and started calling me Renee. And so that's how that happened. But
And ever since, you've been Renee.
yeah, pretty much. Not legally, though, just that way.
Your favorite subjects in high school?
Well, it was Latin and English and speech and drama and public speaking. And we had, I have to say that Orlando Senior High School at that time was an incredibly good school. And most of us didn't learn that until we went to college and realized that we had really had a good education.
You were in speech and drama activities in high school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot.
And then when you went to college, you started at FSU. And,
Went there for 2 years. And then Larry and I got married. And so he had been at the Citadel. He transferred to the University of Florida. And we went there, this 1953, to Gainesville. And I worked and he went to school. And I took some classes because I could, because they were free, one class each semester if you worked there. And that was it for that part of my life.
you did go on to get a degree from...
Yeah, it gets very confusing after that because I think I was about my 40s, when I enrolled in a program at Eckerd College. It was called the Program for Experienced Learners, and I got my college degree, my BA, there with a major in theater, which they had just started this program. It hadn't been active for very long, and they said, you're going to major in theater and you don't live here and you're going to send us papers and things like that. That doesn't sound right. Nobody's ever, done that. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. And he said, okay, I'll talk to the theater department. So he did, and they went along with it. And because I tried to explain that, I'd done a lot of stage work, but I hadn't, really, I had needed the background, the history, I needed to know more. And so they thought that was a good idea, and they let me do it. And I really enjoyed it. I've never written so much in my life because it was sending them papers and whatever. And I think I learned a lot from that experience. But I was very happy to finally get that BA because I knew my family really wanted me to, and my dad was a little disappointed when I dropped out of school to get married, although they loved Larry like a son, which they should have because he's the most wonderful person there ever has been, ever. So it worked out okay. And then, well, I think this is when we get into the real theater part of it in DeLand.
You moved to DeLand
we moved to DeLand in 57.
57.
Larry had graduated from law school, went with Hull Landis Graham and French, which was a firm in DeLand. And we had by then one child. And I didn't do much in theater, but he did. He wasn't there but just a few months and did a role at Shoestring Theater, which was at the airport. It was an old Navy dining hall. And it had just been started in about 1949, 1950. And Ella DeBerard, who lived here, was really the mother of that and did a spectacular job. There was not much. That was really close to the beginning of the spread of community theater in the United States. There weren't too many of them. And they built a stage in the mess hall, and it was doing, pretty well for that kind of thing, a new thing like that. Except there was no heat, there was no air conditioning, and a whole lot of other things. But he did another play, I didn't do anything for a while because I was busy
Raising your
having
children.
another child, and then 2 more after that. And but finally did get back into it when we did. Well, I did do a sort of partly did a thing with Larry called Send Me No Flowers, but I was a funeral salesman. It was a male role that they couldn't cast, so I did it while I was being a prompter, while I was being the stage manager, while I was pulling, the whole thing.
You've done a lot of that
was the first
through the years.
Yeah, and then we did Barefoot in the Park together, and with Fred Messersmith also in that, actually, and Jim Armstrong, and Dottie Sykes, who was just wonderful. And we took it to the Florida Theater Conference in Daytona Beach and did it there too. We had to replace Dottie and Fred because they weren't available. It didn't work out quite that well, but it was okay. It was an experience, anyhow, but it introduced me to the Florida Theater Conference, which were all the, well, it included all the community theaters, or the ones that wanted to be a part of it, and we became that, and I became involved with that for a great number of years afterwards. But after that, I had really done one show there. I was expecting my 4th child, but I didn't know it when I was doing it. So that kept me out of it for a little while. So it wasn't until '67 that we did Barefoot in the Park. And from then, Larry and I did many shows together. Anne of the Thousand Days, same time next year. 2 for the Seesaw, which was one of my favorites. And I got really involved then and started directing eventually too, and it just went on until it was about, when Shoestring, I have to figure this out, I always get the dates wrong. It was in the early 80s,
You mean the 85 to 90?
Yeah, it was about 80, oh no, it was earlier than that. It was around 84, I think it was, that we got the idea among some of us to, we were going to have to move from the theater because the city was going to take it back. They'd been giving it to us, no rent or anything, for a long time. And we finally decided we had to do something about it, have some place to go. And at that time, I was really working with the Museum of Art. I was on the board of the Museum of Art, and that's when the idea for the Cultural Arts Center came up, and we pushed that, and we had agreed within the theater to do that, to be a part of it, along with the Museum of Art. And
the Cultural Arts Center started in 91?
Well, yes.
91?
Well, that's when okay. Yeah, that's when it started.
Can we back up just a minute?
Yeah.
For your 4 children were born in 1955 through 1962.
Yeah,
that's
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeff and Kim and Kent and Steve.
Right.
And they all did some acting also during the time.
Yeah, Kent not
up.
so much, but Steve and Kim did, and Jeff did. Larry and I did a play with Jeff, A Thousand Clowns, and then a few years later did it with Steve. Steve's done a lot more on-stage work, but all of my kids have been contributed a lot. Given up some things, I think, so I could do this.
You said they raised themselves, but I don't
Oh,
believe
yeah,
that for a minute.
absolutely. No, they raised themselves. That's what they tell me. They raised themselves.
But
Well,
Kim,
I thought they did a pretty good job of
oh
it.
yes, they did.
Yeah.
I think you had a great part in that too. Well, Kim actually got a theater scholarship to Rollins.
Yeah,
I
she
believe
got
you
a
said.
and
of course has done directing and directed that play with.
Yeah, and she
at
really
least
thought about that as a career, but then she decided too many of the graduates from Rollins were coming back and just hanging around and doing something after graduation, and she said maybe there wasn't any future in it for her, and that's when she transferred to University of Pennsylvania, got her degree there, and went to law school, went to Rutgers Law School. So I have 3 children who are attorneys, and Larry, of course, was, so it was a real scene when they all got together, believe me.
How about your 4 grandchildren? Are any of them
No,
doing anything in theater?
really not. They were all did some children's theater when we were younger, and I think they enjoyed it, and I think they got something from it, but it wasn't what they wanted to do. But they are, the 2 girls particularly, are in communications, studying communications. Now they're all over 21 now. The youngest one just turned 21, so they're grown.
We've got some pictures
Yeah.
of them too. Okay, now we're talking about the Shoestring, the life of the Shoestring Theater. When did you start with the artist in education and the children's theater? Did that kind of
Well, that was
start
in
up
the 80s too.
In the 80s.
A lot happened
okay.
in the 80s. Actually, before that, in the 70s, I had done some work with some friends from Daytona, and it was the first touring I'd ever done, and we went to the high schools primarily, but we did it for adults elsewhere sometimes. And we called it the Stage East Repertory Company, and there were about 5 of us that were really involved with it. And I enjoyed it. It was wonderful. It was quite an experience, really. It was funded by a grant to DBCC. And I could remember the first show we did, I think. We went to New Smyrna, and it was a very cold and windy day, and all of the set pieces blew off the back of the truck that we were driving over there in, and that scared the living daylights out of it because we were scared enough because we were going to do this for the first time, but we had a marvelous reception from them. We were doing Tartuffe by Molière, which we think, oh, classical theater, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? and it was really good. And we did it for about, 3 or 4 years until the late 70s. And then I was sort of, didn't do too much acting. Well, I did in the early 70s when I did A Doll's House at Daytona Playhouse. That was my first role there. And we did that for the Florida Theater Conference too. And that went well and was really a very special time. And then I'm kind of jumping around here, but things all kind of connected that way. But in the 80s, that's when most everything happened. And that was when we started the Children's Theater Company at Shoestring in 82. And we did our first show. And we were, again, when you try something like that and you're going into the schools and you have all these kids here and you want to make it work and you've never done it, it's kind of hard. Fortunately, I had the Serco experience with the high schools by then. But these were little kids, usually kindergarten for 3rd grade. And we did a interactive play. And that's for that age group, that's what we did. And so they had parts in it at times. We worked with the audience. And I remember going to, Orange City was the first performance. And we were, again, it's frightening. And we did it, and it worked. And I think we spent 45 minutes after the play just talking with the kids and the teachers. And I thought, oh my goodness, why don't they make us stop? They probably have to go back to class. I don't know why that happened, but it did. And so that really inspired us to continue it, which we did. And we did it, it followed part of us into the Cultural Arts Center too. In fact, it was the base of what happened theater-wise for the Cultural Arts Center. So anyway, there was a big hullabaloo. And half the people at Shoestring didn't want to do this. And they wanted to stay small, and they wanted to stay where they were. What I can't understand about it all was they had to leave there, so they were going to have to find some place to stay. So why not give this a shot? Although it was a pretty ambitious undertaking at that time. It was hard to raise the money. We finally did for the Cultural Arts Center. So we split, and they're now Shoestring Theater in Lake Helen, and they do some very, very good work. They can do the kind of plays we can't do at the Athens where we are now because of the space. Some plays just have to be a little more intimate and for a special audience, and that doesn't quite work when you've got to make money on it too, which is a big part of it, and it's not easy. So we go off to the Cultural Arts Center, and they go to Lake Helen eventually. Of course, there was no Cultural Arts Center there. We had to build it. That was really the tough thing to do. And but the Storybook program continued, and we continued. We went into my garage again, a bigger garage, and we actually did a show in there. We built a lot of sets in there. It was getting kind of hard to do this, but we continued. We never missed a season, and we sometimes had double casts because we had to go to so many schools, and sometimes we'd do 2 or 3 performances in one school, in a classroom, in the gym, wherever. And I think I know that we reached finally, and this program continued for over 20 years, and we got to where we were seeing 25,000 kids a year because we advanced and had done that even before we left Shoestring Theater. We had started doing shows there to best in kids that were older, the older elementary school, and maybe some junior high occasionally. So it just went on. Even though we had no place to be, we had to find someplace better than my garage. And
that reminds me of a story that Eric Hall told me.
Yeah.
You were going to Pearson, I believe.
Oh, yes, we were. That was when Serica was going.
Tell us what happened
Pearson.
the day you were to meet at this truck stop.
Well, we were going to a school where we knew we had no opportunity we didn't have a dressing room. Okay. And so I met dear Eric at the truck stop in my costume. And
In full makeup.
Yeah, I think so. And I think whether it couldn't have been Tartuffe. It was either Tartuffe or The Importance of Being Earnest. I can't remember.
But
which
you were
one
both
it was.
and you were
But
going to
we
meet.
were both in our, yeah.
and-
So I was out on the street corner about 5:30 in the morning at the truck stop, which Eric has never stopped telling people about.
This is 40 years ago.
And he picks me up in his costume.
And he
It
was
a little
late.
Crazy. Oh yeah, of course he was late. He's always late. Anyhow.
There were a lot of onlookers at the truck stop.
Yeah. But that was something we're.
Well, during that break between not having Shoestring, from 85 to 91, was it?
It was, we left
86?
Shoestring in 85, I think it was.
You were on the road with
85.
everything, including regular productions.
Well, yes.
Not just
yes,
children's
Yes,
theater.
after, yeah. And that was even before we got some space to work in. The first play we did as a community theater, because we were going to develop this as an organization, and we called it Theater Center, Inc., that had, all types of programs involved with it. And so we rehearsed in this building behind the old Museum of Art on Garfield Avenue. And the first play we did was Inherit the Wind at the courthouse. And we rehearsed in this little room back behind the museum. And it was kind of a large cast. And Eddie Sanders let us use his courtroom, not for rehearsals, but for the production. And actually, he even was the judge in the show. And Larry and another actor who's extremely good was Roland Halliday, played the opposing role to his doctoring or lawyering or whatever he was doing. No, he was the lawyer. And I don't know where they got a doctor from, but anyhow, we did it, and it was very successful. We did it just for one weekend, really. No, I can't remember, but it wasn't too many performances, and it wasn't too many people because it was not what it is quite now. We performed it in the old courthouse, but it was before they remodeled it, the last remodeling of it. So that worked out. That was fine. But now what are we going to do? So next year we didn't do any more. We did the children's shows, and then the next year we did. Oh gosh, I'm going to have a memory lapse here. No, it's about Beckett, but not Beckett. I have forgotten the name of it.
You did a lot of shows. It's hard to remember.
Murder in the Cathedral.
Okay.
Yeah, Murder in the Cathedral at the Episcopal Church with a huge cast too, because we cast some young people in it, and we just we did a lot with it, and that worked. So this idea wasn't so bad. We were getting good audiences, and so finally we got space to work in, not to produce in, but to have. Places where we could put costumes and build sets and do all those kind of things and have offices and so on, and rehearsals, some. And that was the house, it used to be Eastwood Terrace, across the street on Garfield and 44 from where the museum had been. Mm-hmm. And we were there for several years, had a wonderful landlord, and I think you'll recognize the name. It was Al Cacamisi.
Oh, yeah.
Or Cacamise.
I
always say it wrong.
I always say kamikaze, but that's not,
no,
that's
not
right. That's not right.
Anyway, so we were there. So that was very helpful. We had a place, and we had a little sign outside that said Theater Center, Inc., Well, then we started full seasons, and we did full seasons of community theater and children's theater, and Day Blackburn started the touring company, so we were getting somewhere along the way to where we needed to be when we opened the Cultural Arts Center, and that's what it was, just a journey to the Cultural Arts Center, which was finally finished in 1991. And we went into there, but we had incredible experiences on the road at the Women's Club, at a hotel in Daytona Beach, at the Barry Fire Hall, at a building at Stetson, at churches, at the Presbyterian Church. We'd done the Episcopal Church, at innumerable places. And it sort of worked. It was, and everybody devoted so much time and energy to it. It was just incredible. We finally, when we moved into the Cultural Arts Center in '91, we were much better organized. And I owe so much to Rosemary Sutton, who was the community theater director for many years, or producer. We had guest directors frequently. And Laverta Felton, who took over the Children's Theater Company and did marvelous educational programs with them in the schools, in addition to the plays that we kept taking there. And Day with her touring company, and it just was Darlene Stewart then took over later for Laverta, who went on to help more with the Cultural Arts Center itself for a few years, and it worked. It really did work, but it's still. We still had somewhere to go. So we started stage 2.
Okay.
And that was up in the little room upstairs, which is in the Cultural Arts Center, which has been several things along the way, but it was on the museum side. But we used that room, the Dries Johnson room, and that was very, very helpful because we had the small, little, intimate thing where we could do some special shows.
Call that black box, the black box theater?
It's a black box, yes, very much, yeah. And that worked too for a very special audience. We didn't have huge numbers. We didn't have a lot of space. And the first show we did, well, I can't remember what the first one was. What was the first one? We did so many of them. We did Driving Miss Daisy, but we didn't do it there. We did that downstairs because sometimes we did them for organizations and charities and things like that. We did original plays.
You like original plays.
I like original plays.
You've written a lot of.
Yeah, well, not so much.
Well,
I did write plays for children that were part of the children's theater season, but and I did write plays when I was an artist in education for the schools, which was in the mid '80s too. This was at the same time, but we did. Mark Twain, The Stormfield Days, which the actor that I had worked with in Daytona Beach was in Doll's House with me, and in Serco with me, and so that went on, and it was very interesting, and we did Marjorie Canaan Rawlings on trial, and that was really the biggest thing. We got statewide publicity on that. It was written by, and I need to look at the paper to see his name. I have to be sure to get it right.
I'll get it.
But a teacher from, a professor from University of Florida, original play, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is cut it, because it would have lasted 4.5 hours, I think, if we did the whole play. But I wasn't allowed to touch his work without his permission, so I had to call him daily for about 6 weeks in order to get through editing this. It got down to 2.5 hours.
That was the only time, the first production of that play anywhere.
Oh yeah, that was the first production.
That was about the lady who sued Marjorie, her. Wasn't it about a lady who sued her because she was portrayed inappropriately, she thought, in one of her
exactly. Libel, yeah.
How'd that turn out?
Well, she won and then she lost, and then actually she paid a small amount of money and then it went away. But after the trial, I mean, they actually, it was very good.
Mm-hmm. Well, during all this, you were getting a master's degree, and you were...
yeah, I was doing that. I forgot that. Yeah.
Emerson College?
I did a state...
and then NYU?
I did a study abroad program in England through New York University. And I went there 2 summers and went to New York University till I got my master's from New York University. And that was between 86, 87.
That was it.
Yeah, and I had wonderful people that took care of the children's theater for me while I was gone. Evelyn and Lee Williams were absolutely remarkable. And that was what it was really so much all about, is these incredible people that just gave so much, and most of them volunteers. And the hours we put in, I mean, I remember 24-hour days, nights, practically. Not too many of those, but really. We used to joke about having to, set up some cots or something like that so we could get some sleep. And I remember building a set on New Year's Eve, and all kinds of things like that. It was strenuous. Of course, the biggest hurdle was raising the money for the Cultural Arts Center, honestly. And and Larry was very instrumental in that and did a wonderful job with it, along with a lot of other very good people. And it was just a real experience all the way through. And if I get dates and things mixed up, I can't remember sometimes because they kind of intertwine. And then in the middle of all of that, I think I went to the Atlantic Center Arts for a class with June Havoc, Gypsy Rosalie's little sister, that was also very interesting. I liked her very much. Very, very intelligent. I got to give her a plug, bless her heart. She's deceased now, but she had more strength and viability and was more intelligent than so many people I know. And she didn't even have any education formally. And her story through Gypsy is really pretty much on target. She didn't talk much about her family, but it was just a good experience getting to know her.
That's great.
Yeah, and let me think. There's just so much. It's hard, and I know jumping around doesn't help anybody, but I could put it a little more concisely, I think. But then, what do? We get things going, everything's going all right. We decide we have to do something else. And so that's when we decided to get involved with the Athens. And there were...
And Larry was the idea man, you told me.
Yeah, he
was
was the greatest visionary I've ever seen. If you could follow through on everything he wanted to do, but he was got a little overboard sometimes, but made it work, and made such a contribution in so many ways that I can't express it. None of it would have happened without him.
And he helped a great deal financially.
We won't talk about that.
Right.
Okay.
When did you come up with the idea, or when did he come up with the idea of redoing?
Of going into the Athens?
Going into the Athens.
Actually, that was my fault. As I said, I was on the board of the museum at that time, and one evening a few of us went out to the log cabin after the meeting, and we started talking, and so there were people from the museum and people, well, there were only 4 of us actually, the director of the museum, and Jim Mitchell, who became the architect, and Mary Ann Lawrence, who was in charge of the building chairman for the Cultural Arts Center. And we talked about it, about probably doing something like that. If we did something like that, we had to do it together because we couldn't afford it. They needed a new place, we needed more space. So and Margaret Lee was very involved in all of this. Finally, we formed the board of trustees and for the Cultural Arts Center, and worked for a long time to get it done. This was in 2004, and I remember I was chairman of the board or whatever at the time, and of the theater, and I got really nervous about this, and I was cool. I had a meeting, and Larry was going to present the idea for it, and I had just gotten over the flu, and I was really feeling badly, and it comes up for a vote after he had presented this remarkable plan for this thing we would do with the Athens. And we were going to stay, we thought we were going to stay at the Cultural Arts Center with our children's program with the black box. That's what we wanted to do. And it comes to a vote, and I thought, oh my gosh, they all voted for it. And I thought, oh, if I hadn't been sick, I could have made a speech and said, we shouldn't do this. But fortunately, I let it go. I couldn't do anything about it. No, I really wanted to do it too, but I was a little more pragmatic, I think. And that was something else, trying to raise money for the Athens Theater. And remember, when we were getting close to getting finished with this, and Main Street DeLand had the building, and they had renovated the outside part of it, but they hadn't done anything with the inside because they ran out of money, and nobody was going to do anything. But they were going to tear the building down probably and make a parking lot out of it. And that's when I got excited about it, because I thought, okay, I can go along with this. And we did. And it took a while. And unfortunately, I guess everybody remembers 2008 when nobody had any money. And we sure didn't. And nobody wanted to give us any. And the grants were drying up. We had been getting grants for our the rest of our program. We, it just was gone. So we just hung in there, struggled through, and finally, we opened, did a show in there in 2009, and then really got in there for good in 2010. Wouldn't have gotten in there at all except for Clark Adams, that I have to thank too, because he's the one that got us there. He was the artistic director for the last couple of years in the Cultural Arts Center and for a couple of years in the Athens, and he was in charge of the move of all of our stuff into the theater when we finally got it done, and we couldn't have done it without him. It just seemed that somebody came along every time we really got needy, and it just it's amazing what's happened. And now that it's
really going well with lots of production.
It is.
We have a picture of the theater when the outside was finished that you gave me, that we have a scan of, and you called it the celebration starring John Mica.
Yeah, that was we had gotten some grants from the government, and John Mica has always been, whatever you say about his politics, has been a remarkable supporter for Volusia County. And we had a street fair thing, kind of just like that.
Your children's theater, this Sands Theater Center, or the children's part, that name continued even through the Athens.
The name part, that's the hard part. That's what everybody doesn't understand, and I can explain that simply, I think. Okay, it was a shoestring theater. It was Storybook Theater, shoestring theater, children's theater company. Then it was Theater Center Inc. when we moved out of there, and it became Storybook Children's Theater Company because we had to rename it. Then when we added the community theater, that became the St. Johns River Players, probably because it started in my garage, and we lived on the St. Johns River. And then when we moved into the Cultural Arts Center, the community theater part became Brewertown Players. It was all under the name of Theater Center Inc. Until 2000, when they changed the name to the Sands Theater Center Inc. So it's really not all that crazy, but it was confusing to a lot of people, I think.
But your youth theater, I know on a resume you gave me, it was 82 through 2012. So they were still doing productions in the Athens Theater, children's workshops, and, and all those things that were still continuing, and they do now.
Programming has changed, and mostly it has changed since we continued it through pretty much the way it was until we moved into the Athens, even for a year or so after that. But then that's another time when the money was not available from the school, but we were getting some money from the school board for it. We charged, but things got much more difficult with more testing in the schools. The schools were, it was just, they really didn't have a space for it. And it just, we didn't do that anymore, but we continued children's programming. We did a lot of it in the theater then, of course, because we had a home. And we've always bussed kids in, and we did when we were at the Athens too, and they do it now. They did just recently with James and the Giant Peach.
Right. Sure did.
So, it's just went on.
All this work you have done has been, would you say, 90% voluntary, and as a volunteer, and very small amount was you were paid for. So maybe the artist in education for Volusia schools.
Oh yeah, that
might have been a thing.
Yeah. When I was the artist in education, that was a program that Dorothy Johnson started, and it was for visual artists mostly, and I worked with. And Tom Zach and George Lario. He was a sculptor. She was a photographer. The 2 years that I did it, nobody had ever done it in theater before. and went to numerous schools and set up various things that we would do, programs we would do, and yeah, I got paid for that. That was nice, but and that was one of my, that's when I started writing. Well, I had written already a couple of plays, so I had a chain of the Scalawag series, which is another story altogether. That did tour the schools and were done for children. But I worked with the children there, and this was in the middle 80s too. We did a play for the fourth grade. The whole fourth grade was involved in it. There were 3 classrooms of children, and we took a story, The Bluebird, and I read it to the kids, the children's version of it, and I said, okay, well, we'll take some of that and let's make a play from it. And their input was what wrote it, really, because we created the characters and we performed it finally for the parents, and we had a large cast of kids, and that worked very well. In fact, the play has been done since. When we did it there, it was very short, about a half an hour, I guess, even though we worked on it, and George made 3-dimensional costumes for it, and I did work with her photography that we fit into it, and then I had the kids. And I let the teachers cast it, send me the ones that really wanted to do it, because I didn't know any of them. And I worked with the 3 classrooms, with the 3 groups that would come from my classrooms. But then it's been done at the Atlantic Center for the Arts and at Gateway, and Darlene directed it once at the theater. I directed it once at the theater, so it's had several performances. I made it longer. I embellished it. But the kids had a lot to do with it. And that happened a couple of other times with the Scalawag plays, too, because I'd work with the kids in the schools and talk to them about the characters. They'd give me ideas. We'd work on that. One play that was done had it was a jungle scene, and one of the kids from McGinnis Elementary School gave me a drawing that he'd done that he thought the set should look like, and it was very good, and we did it.
That was Scalawag.
That was that wasn't.
That was
that was a Scalawag. Yeah, that was one of the Scalawag plays.
Unfortunately, these activities are not going on much. You were a real pioneer in that, bringing this to the kids in the school, and it's not going on as much anymore.
I think along the way we had a lot of cooperation from the teachers. And a lot of them picked up on some of the ideas that we presented, or could see the use of theater in education. Because I really am a big believer in early childhood education, and I know how much theater can input, and I know that's what I studied when I was in England too. I really, it just. I don't know. This is all a jumble. I know this has been all a jumble, and I meant to do it more chronologically or sensibly, but the thoughts just keep, flying.
No, they have to. The Scalawag production comes to mind because we recently had at the Athens, Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah.
As you'd done it before, but they did it again, and Elizabeth Murph.
I directed it once.
Exactly.
And then we did another performance.
And you saw it twice because I was there ushering both days this
Yeah.
last time. But Elizabeth Murph played Miss Daisy, and she is in some of the pictures of the Scalawag production from, 30 years ago?
30 years ago.
30
Yeah,
years ago.
yeah.
So you had the opportunity to go backstage to talk with her.
Yeah, I went back there and talked with her. In fact, I said it was 20 years. She said, no, it's more like 30. And I said, yeah, you're right, it is more like 30. Yeah, she worked with us.
We have a couple of good pictures of her in that Scalawag production that you gave me that week.
Yeah,
That's
that
great.
was good.
She's done a lot since then.
And that's another thing about theater. You don't see somebody for 30 years and you see them again, and it's like no time has passed at all.
Exactly. Well, now we're up to 2017, and You're mainly a going to the theater person, or are
Yeah,
you still doing
I'm mostly
anything?
going to the theater person. Yeah.
You're not doing anything really actively in theater at this time, other than going to the plays.
Right. Getting
Time
a
to
little bit
retire.
old for that.
Time to retire a little bit and
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah.
and realize that you were the forerunner of a lot of this, and we wouldn't be here today talking
Oh, I didn't know.
if it hadn't been for
I don't know. I just
Rene Sands and Larry.
You have no idea how many people have said, I think I finally learned how to say no to you. and they're so proud of themselves for that. I think I tricked a lot of people into doing things. I said, here, take this and do that. And if they did it well, I'd have them do it again. But I was just, I was always looking for people to do the things I was doing so I could do something else. I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
Well, we talked earlier about some inventions. What invention really affected you the most, or did you particularly enjoy? And I think you talked about radio.
Radio?
Radio.
Yeah, radio, because that's all there was when I was a kid. And that hadn't been going around for too long. Yeah, that was because, in fact, I remember writing a paper in junior high school or somewhere about that was my profession. That was what I was going to do. I was going to do radio work stuff.
Well, you were a disc jockey when you were.
Well, sort of.
You did all that.
That's.
And you reported the news.
I did that
At your high school. You were the news reporter.
Yeah, I did some shows. There were some. Yeah, I had some radio experience along the way.
What stands out as your most memorable experience? Your study abroad, or?
Well, of my
other than all of this put together, one particular experience that really
the study
was
abroad
beneficial.
program, I think, was certainly was, and Larry was so good. I mean, we'd send 4 kids through school. That's why I could do things in the 80s. All the kids were in school, in college, gone. Anyway, they all went to college, and Larry took care of all that, of course, financially, and graduate school and a whole lot of stuff. And I was gone 7 weeks for 3 summers, and he was so good about it. He just encouraged me to do it when maybe we could have been cruising around the world or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we did get some cruises in there along the way, and the traveling we did together was wonderful. But I cherish that time. Actually, one of our tutors from there came and worked with us for about 15 years, and occasionally, and helped at the theater. Directed a show, did some on-stage work. We were still close. Mm-hmm. It just goes round and round. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I like the way it all connects.
Well, we were talking about whether we put this in or not, but some of your favorite actresses are some of my favorites, and I think some maybe
you just want to talk about
it. I think I have a few names written down.
Yeah,
here.
I know you do. You want me to say them?
Go ahead, and I'll fill in if we don't.
Okay. All right. Judi Dench. Okay. Maggie Smith. Who else?
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep, of course. And the one that I'm always forgetting?
Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren. Maybe because I haven't seen as many of her shows.
And maybe June Havoc because you had
and
the
June,
opportunity.
of course, yeah.
And then you talked about meeting Julie Harris.
Oh, yeah, I met Julie Harris once here at something that Stetson was doing, and it was through Margaret Lee. And just briefly talked to her. It was a very small gathering, and just talked to her for a minute. And it was nice. It was good.
Based on your experience, what advice would you give to a young person today in terms of about life or about going into theater?
Well, I would say if you are passionate about this, if you're really passionate about it, it's something that you really have to do. Something inside you is telling you you have to do this. It'd be nice if you had a little talent too, but just try it, do it. If you don't feel that way about it, don't do it. Don't just do it because, oh, I might like to do this or that. That's not going to work. And to remember that there are many other jobs in theater besides acting, that being a stage manager, working tech, all those other kinds of jobs are available. And I think stage managers, except for the big stars, are usually paid more than the actors or actresses are. Or that used to be the truth anyway. If you've got to do it, but have something else in mind, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But there's something out there, and if you really care that much, you can find it. But you have to work at it. You just really have to work at it, and you have to be lucky. You just have to be lucky. Too many people want to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I had the opportunity to go to the Peabody over in Daytona right after I found out that I was going to have the honor of interviewing you today.
Yeah.
And I was with a friend who knew a lot of theater people over there, and I had the opportunity to meet Ernie Dyer.
Yeah, we did a couple shows together.
And I told her what I was going to be doing, and without hesitation, I asked her, "Tell me something about Rene." Without hesitation, she said, and I quote, I may have one or two words, but she is the only actor I've known who actually becomes the person she is playing. To me, that's the ultimate compliment.
It is.
To an actor.
It honestly is. Because I know that's the way I feel about actors generally, is that has to happen for it to work, to be real, to make it believable. And if you don't believe it, I don't care whether it's a farce, which is silly and stupid, it can still be believable in where it is. It just has to be there. And if you're going to play a number of different kinds of parts, it's essential. And I know I've done some roles I didn't believe in enough myself, and I wasn't pleased with what I did. And I've done some that I really got into, and Nora in The Doll's House was one of them.
Rene, how would you like to be remembered?
I don't know. I'd like to be remembered as a good mother, but since my kids raised themselves, it probably doesn't count. Anyway, I don't know. I really never thought of that. Even when we talked about it, I still can't think about it. I don't have any idea of how I'd like to be remembered. I'd like the things that I have believed in to be successful and to go on with good people doing them. That's what I like. That's what it's all about, I think.
I think that is the way we were going to remember you.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It has been such a pleasure and an honor. Mm-hmm. It's been such a pleasure and an honor today to have this conversation, and I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Margaret. It's always good being with you.
Thank you.